Emmanuel Macron may have outlasted the Yellow Vest movement. Now he's got the unions against him, maybe all of them. The French government's formal rollout of its pension reform plan, prompting a rolling over of strikes already in their 7th day and triggering calls for massive demonstrations next Tuesday. Has Macron, who stormed to power in 2017 by bringing together reformers from the left and the right, finally chosen his camp? The French president, who we can show you recently arguing the point with Whirlpool factory workers in a native city of Amiens, has prepared the country for the privatization of rail, loosened labor law, hardened rules on benefits for the unemployed. Is he a reformer and a modernizer, or taking the axe to France's beloved welfare state? Pension reform, which comes halfway through his 5-year mandate, could be a real acid test. It would raise the age for full retirement benefits to 64, unite France's 42 different pension schemes under a single points plan, the needed remedy for a nation with an aging population and a system that all agree is currently unsustainable, or the beginning of the end of France as we know it. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at what seems like full steam ahead for Macron's reform. And joining us, French Member of Parliament, Jacques-Marie Le Sien. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening.
We also want to welcome Danny Lang, member of the think tank. Is it a think tank? How would you call it?
No, not really. It's an association of economists who are completely appalled.
It's called
by
Les Économistes Atterrés. You
yes.
translate it as?
Appalled economists.
The appalled economists.
And I'm completely appalled by this so-called reform, by the way.
All right, there's a spoiler. Yeah. Perhaps we'll see if he agrees. François-Xavier Oliveau, the author of Micro-Capitalism towards a new social contract. Is that how you would say?
That would be
towards a new social contract. And with us as well, Philip Golub, who writes on globalization and teaches international relations at the American University of Paris. Hi, welcome back to the show. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, pressure from both sides in the run-up to the big announcement. You had last week an independent auditor which warned of more red ink than first thought in France's pension system, and the unions raising that pressure with the strikes that started last Thursday. Now it's here, rolled out at midday by the Prime Minister. The plan has been unveiled. Monty Francis has more.
France currently has 42 different pension regimes or plans based on profession. Those separate plans would all come under one universal plan, which promises to be the same for almost everyone. The government wants to end special plans, which allow early retirement for certain professions, such as metro drivers who can retire at 55. The government's plan would not affect those born before 1975 and would work on a points-based system, calculating a person's pension based on the hours they've worked over the time of their entire career. Women are promised 100% compensation for maternity leave, and there would be a minimum monthly pension payment of 1,000 euros. The legal retirement age would remain 62, with the so-called pivot age. When the maximum benefits kick in, it would stay 64. The Prime Minister indicated there would be some exceptions for people with physically demanding jobs, such as nurses, police, and firefighters, who could retire earlier.
Jacques-Marie Le Sien, is this an easy or a hard sell to the French?
It's difficult. I was looking at the BBC last Thursday, and the journalist in London was asking the correspondent in Paris, can you explain why French people and unions are demonstrating on strike? And the English journalist in Paris explained France has the best pension system, 40% of the GDP. Only 7% of the retirees are poor, as so-called.
Under the poverty line.
Under the poverty line. And then the lady in London asked, why are they demonstrating? And he said, I don't know. First, and he said it's a tradition. You are on strike first, and then you discuss afterwards. Just an example: the government has proposed to think about this system 2 years ago. There were a high commissioner. He published his report in July, and it was planned to have discussions between September and mid-December. We are now in mid-December. By mid-September, the unions, rail, train, RATP, metro, have called for a strike on December the 5th. not just discussing, they were asking, they were calling for the strike 2.5 months before.
Leverage for bargaining?
It's a French tradition of bargaining, negotiating.
But you do concede that they're on strike because they're worried about their pensions and they want this system that works to remain.
No, I can't say that because a lot of FUD has been spread all over the network, social network, etc., to devaluate the reform, and sometimes it were fake news or really true manipulations. I can explain later.
Danny Long, what do you see in this reform?
I completely disagree with everything that has just been said. Honestly, for some unions, maybe the most radical ones, it's a tradition, it's a way of bargaining in this country, but not for all unions. And all unions are upset because they have made their own calculuses, and many people in this country will lose a lot from that. First of all, we didn't need this reform. The system was completely equilibrated, so we didn't need that
independent auditor
reform.
last week saying that it's running a deficit and a bigger one.
Yeah, why is it running an artificial deficit? It's running an artificial deficit because the government took money away from the system in order to put it in the so-called measures in favor of the yellow vests, which is completely artificial. That system did not need any reform. It was good, and some people will lose a lot, and they know they will lose a lot. They made the calculuses, they discussed a lot.
No.
Honestly, you cannot say that. Be honest, please.
You
have to be honest.
The problem, sir, is people are not either listening or reading.
I listen and I read a lot, and I worked a lot.
All right, wait, let's go over this point by point. What is the big point?
We have to discuss.
What is the
big point is that for some people, their pension will go down from 500 to 600 euros a month,
absolutely
including for teachers.
All right, let's talk about teachers. Jacques-Marie Lossian, right now, just to explain to our viewers, if you're in the private sector, your pension is calculated over the average of your salary over a quarter century.
Not exactly.
25 best years.
25 best years.
No, absolutely not. If you are in the private sector, which represents 70% of the workers, okay, you have two systems. One is the basic systems, which is based on trimesters, okay? And then you have a complementary pension, which is based on points. Points you have earned all along your life, which is a pay-as-you-go system, and then you are credited with the value of these points. So for at least 70% of these people working in private sector, this is not a big change. We already have points. Okay,
right. But for a teacher,
but
for instance, you're in the public sector, and your pension is based on what you earn in the last 6 months of your career. Can you tell us that teachers will earn as much as they did before when they retire?
This is exactly what the Prime Minister has announced today. He has also announced something which is absolutely new for the people working in the public sector. First of all, the people who are working in hard conditions, you say,
with tough jobs,
tough jobs, let's say. Actually, this is not taken into account for public sector. He confirmed that it will be taken into account, and those people will benefit from something like up to 2 years to able to retire.
So it won't quite be one size fits all.
First of all, second point: if you are a woman and if you have children, okay. In the public sector, for our children, you are benefiting from two trimesters, only two, okay? Out of 169 which are required to benefit from your pension, which exactly means something like 1.5%. In the new system, and this will be valid for the public sector, they will benefit of 5% per child, 5% per child from the first child, 5% for the second child, 5% for the third, and a bonus of 2.
Right.
So it's a benefit for these people, for the women working in public sector. They are benefiting from this.
I want to get back to that point, but first, Philip Golub.
This is announced today, sir.
Just to explain for our viewers, because people watching us from other countries, they're watching us in places like the United States, where the complementary plan that's most of what you earn for your pension. It's a piddly sum what you get from the government, and that's true in a lot of countries. That are
I mean, one of the problems, if you try to compare this across countries, what you find is if you take the United States as an example, most of the retirement plans are based on capitalization programs, so invested in pension funds, pushed through, funneled through the financial system, and therefore subject to the variations up and down,
as we saw in 2007.
As we saw in 2007 and 8, if you're retiring at the wrong moment in the United States over a long period of recession or a financial crisis, you're going to be losing most of your pension. So that there's a great amount in programs that base themselves on capitalization as a means by which to secure your retirement. There's a great amount of uncertainty and danger for people involved if you live through a period of recession at the time when you're taking your pension.
Which explains, by the way, that in the United States you have so many elderly still working in restaurants.
Exactly, and this forces, of course, forces elderly people, particularly today, to continue working well beyond the age where they could have retired.
What's announced by the government doesn't say we're switching to the American system.
No, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that there has been a trend, there has been a very intense discussion in France, from what I've seen, behind the scenes rather than publicly, over creating a mixed system between the current system, which is based on intergenerational solidarity, to a system in which capitalization programs and pension funds would become a significant complementary part of the French pension system. There were the discussions that were held between Larry Fink of BlackRock and the President of the Republic, Emmanuel Macron, as well as other people in France, over this. There were explicit discussions on this. So there's a concern in France. I think one does need to answer one of the questions that was raised by BBC: why do French people go and demonstrate? Well, there's a very strong tradition in France. I'm a political scientist and not an economist. I'm not a specialist of retirement issues. But there's a very strong and historical tradition in France.
Agreed.
Of not only public protest, but also of adherence to, and I think this is a specificity of the French political tradition, adherence to the idea that people have rights, the right to have rights, that citizenship is linked to rights, and not to programs that are executive programs that are imposed on them. So people are demonstrating for fear, right or wrong, possibly right, that some of their essential rights are being
wrong.
Completely right.
No. Well, I
disagree. Let's begin François-Xavier Oliveau on this. François-Xavier Oliveau. As you heard, there's the timeline for people. Demonstrations started last Thursday. The reform is announced this Wednesday. What do you think of what you've seen?
Well, I think what I've seen is that government will have difficulties to go through this reform because, they're trying three things at the same time: reforming special regimes, trying to implement a point system, which I think it makes sense. But it's a big revolution, and also trying to adjust the parameters of the system, which indeed is losing money. The total spending in pensions is about 320 billion euros. 60 of which come roughly from taxes and not from social contributions. So it has been losing money since the implementation of CSG in '91 by Rocard. The system is not balanced and financed through the taxes. One of the issues I actually regret what Philip mentioned about trying to think about capitalization. Most countries which have capitalization do spend less portion of the GDP into pensions because the benefits of the capital markets actually go to pensions.
But it depends completely.
The problem
on
is
what kind of context
the problem is that
if it goes down.
Please, let me finish. If you will, I didn't stop you when you were talking. Thank you very much. The problem is the benefits of the French companies do pay pensions for Canadian people or US people through pension funds. And this is. I regret personally that as a future pensionee, I don't have any choice than spending my pensions or my contributions into a system, which is forcing me into this system.
But isn't it a fairer system if it's the government that determines a steady set sum, as is the case right now? It's tied to inflation, rather than have the private sector, and again, as Philip was mentioning, the whims of whether or not the stock market goes up or down?
No, I mean I mean this is a part of risk taking versus non-risk taking. But as an individual person, I demand the right to be able to take my own risks. I demand the right to be able to invest in markets rather than in a global system, and at least to have part of my contributions that can be allowed to financial markets. Actually, Laurent Berger from CFDT was claiming for, I want that the benefits of the CAC 40 companies to benefit to pensioners. I agree with him. Let us invest.
All right,
in
let's listen
companies.
to Laurent Berger. He's the head of the reformist CFDT trade union. He's often been the one who sits down and does deals with the government, but that there's one part of this bill that he doesn't like: the 64-year-olds threshold. That's the age at which you can get a full pension. He says it's a deal breaker.
The CFDT had a red line. That red line was a reform forcing people to work longer. Moreover, the age measures announced in this reform are insufficient, especially for those in sectors with difficult working conditions.
So there you have it, François-Xavier Oliveau. He doesn't like that 64-year-old.
He's wrong.
I mean, in any case, I mean, the idea of rebalancing the whole system is to push people to work a bit longer and to align the age of retirement with the rest of Europe. It's not completely crazy. It does make a bit of sense.
Just one thing. I think from a political and social perspective, there must be some reason why a majority. I've looked at the polls. The majority of the French population, actually, for the moment at least, adheres to, supports the strike movement, even if this causes significant amounts of disagreement for them. So it's disagreeable to them in terms of their daily life and so on and so on. There's anxiety. The reforms that have been introduced by this government over the past 2 years have clearly created a lot of anxiety in people. And this is not only on the pensions, it's on a whole series of issues. And I think a significant part of the demonstrations show that people are demonstrating about their pensions and they're mobilizing around pensions. But I think there are a whole set of issues of anxiety-producing issues that are pushing people into the streets, as also was the case in 1995. So I think it's the entire package of social programs that has been proposed or imposed in most cases, actually, rather than proposed, because there weren't real negotiations that are creating deep anxieties.
All right, we're going to react to that, but we have to take, unfortunately, a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We've had 6 days of strikes here in France in the build-up to this Wednesday, the Prime Minister unveiling the government's ambitious pension reform plan. With us to talk about it, French Member of Parliament Jacques-Marie Le Sion, who hails from Emmanuel Macron's La République En Marche party. How do you translate that, by the way? La République En Marche. How do you translate it in English?
Marching Republic?
The Republic on the March?
Republic on the March, yes.
Okay, all right. With us as well, Danny Lang, who translated for us earlier. The Appalled Economists is the name of your collective. Is that how you would say it?
Yeah, collective.
All right, the collective.
They're frightened.
François-Xavier Oliveau, who is the author of Microcapitalism Towards a New Social Pact. Microcapitalism, the idea that, the sharing age, don't be afraid of the future, effectively.
Pretty much, yeah. And anyone becomes a capitalist by using his own, micro capital, his own house, his own car. And I also worked as a contributor to a think tank, Génération Libre.
Génération Libre, the think tank as well. We're in the company of Philip Golub, who looks at globalization and all of its forms and who teaches international relations at the American University of Paris. Welcome back. During those the last week, there's been a lot of talk during the protests over pension reform about solidarity. We saw it Tuesday during marches in the southern port city of Marseille.
They are talking about certain regimes that are privileged pension schemes, like for rail and metro workers. But these are not the privileged ones. The privileged are the people who have millions. They're not the ones who retire at 57. This should be the normal retirement age.
I believe in this system of solidarity between generations. And clearly the aim of this reform, like everything that has been happening since Macron arrived, is to break the French social model.
To break the French social model, Jacques-Marie Le Sion.
This is, I can't find the word in English. Lies, manipulation, wrong assertion.
Or is it, as Philip Golub explained just before the break, anxiety?
He's right.
It's more than that.
The current system is outrageously complex. Okay, I was just discussing with the people who were making up the makeup before the debate. I explained them that if they have children, they should declare the children. Otherwise, they will not benefit from the 8th trimester per child. Those two ladies who were there were ignorant. They didn't know that they had to do it. Okay, and you have plenty of people who don't know how this works. You have plenty of people today who do believe that maybe they won't have a pension in 40 years from now because they don't understand the system.
And they see an aging population.
And with an age, which is not exactly the problem as of today.
But factual, because those who work pay for those who are retired.
Yes, and what are we?
There's going to be fewer of them.
What are we today? We have a solidarity system, a distribution system. The working generations are paying the pension for the retiree. What are we proposing? To maintain this solidarity, to maintain the fact that the workers will pay for the retiree. This is still the same system. And you have thousands of people in the streets shouting, manipulating people, explaining that this is not true. I'm sorry, you just have to look and read the report and read what the government, the Prime Minister has announced today. We are maintaining the distribution system of solidarity. You can't tell the opposite. You can't tell the opposite. We are maintaining the solidarity.
I'm sorry, but for lots of professions, formally what you say is true, but for lots of professions, the result of this reform...
Give me an example.
...will be for teachers.
Give me an example.
For example, for teachers. If you want to maintain the current pension system for teachers, you will have to increase their wages dramatically because we are in a country, for your viewers, where the salaries, the wages of the teachers are incredibly low in Europe. So you would have to double the salary in order to maintain the same level of pension that you have today.
Absolutely not. This is a total lie. So I can't let you say that. I can't. You are not.
Just be honest and serious.
We can't have an honest debate if you are saying such things. I'm sorry.
I want to have an honest debate. So you said that you will maintain the level of their pension, in which case their wages should be multiplied by 2.
No.
Jacques-Marie Le Sion, the other day on the radio, there was a French primary school teacher saying, I expect to earn 2,600 euros a month during the final 6 months of my career.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true.
What kind of a pension will she have under this new system?
The calculation, it's based on the last 6 months.
Currently.
Okay.
Currently.
And if I know the figures right, he will have a pension that represents not 2,600, but 70%, I think, of these 2,600. Okay? So we will do exactly what is needed to make it happen. First, by increasing the level of the wages of the teachers.
Which means doubling it.
I must add one point that is very, very important for the women. As of today, they are benefiting for just 2 trimesters in the current system for the teachers. In the new system, this benefit will be multiplied by 4. By 4, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Right or wrong, it is true.
Maybe. What I want to say is this: is that the point that I think you were driving at is that and what you mentioned, that wages are very low compared to other European countries in certain key professions that are the most socially useful professions: nurses, educators, teachers, and so on and so forth. This is something that I think France and other countries actually have to think about. But in this case, we're talking about France, which is that those socially useful professions, the most socially useful professions, are the ones whose wages should be significantly pushed upwards to make it feasible for them to live decent lives while they're performing their essential social services. Yes. 2,600 euros brut a month at the end of a career
Gross.
of teaching.
Gross, yes.
Gross income at the end of a teaching
all
career
agree. We all agree.
is ridiculous.
We
It's
all
actually,
agree.
frankly, ridiculous.
We all agree.
So, and I think that's true for nurses also.
So here,
But
so here's
if
here's
you-
the problem.
Sorry, the president himself told that if we want to maintain the current pensions for the people who are in these professions, it would require 10 billion euros, which we don't have, he said. So this is honest. The
François
president himself told that.
François Xavier Olivo, we live in a country where if you look at the whole of the European Union, one of the second biggest economy of the Eurozone, there's lots of success stories here. France, despite the strikes and everything, it's not doing that badly. But when it comes to pensions, we're talking about a nation where there's a sizable, more than in other countries, percentage of the population that either works for the public sector or whose job depends on the public sector.
20%.
Well, who I'm worried about are actually all the others, and especially the independent people who don't have any wages, who will work with their own type of profession. Because work is changing. The way people interact with society and economy is changing, and we'll have more and more people, employ independently or working for platforms, internet platforms. And those people,
And we're already seeing that with the younger generation, the 18 to 24-year-olds.
and they don't have. I mean, the whole pension system was founded, after the war, a bit before the war. It depends, but let's say it's about 70 years old, and it was built around the concept of wages. Of people entering a profession at 20 and leaving at 60, 65, whatever, but staying in the same company or in the same trade during their overall life. This is completely gone, and this will be even more gone in the future. And what I regret in the approach that we have is that it doesn't take this into account. It doesn't take it.
Does the reform plan take it into account?
No, the reform. I mean, what we promoted at Génération Libre as a reform is something more ambitious, trying to take into account the fact that careers are going to be non-linear. People are going to do different jobs. Change jobs / which is doing two or three jobs at the same time.
And the point system doesn't answer that?
And that would be
It
will answer partly this.
The current
that is
system
correct.
does not answer it.
And it will currently answer
How
it.
does
But
the point system answer
I think we need to go a bit
Yeah,
further.
exactly.
What we would try to see.
One at a time,
What we
please.
try to see what we try to promote at Génération Libre is a system where you could actually take into account all the needs of the young generation and say, for example, I can save for my pension during 4 or 5 years, and then take those points and spend them on a sabbatical, for example, and then go back to work, and maybe leave stop working at 65 or 70 or 60, whatever I need, but make my own arbitrage between should I work longer, earn more at my retirement, leave earlier. I think there should be much more flexibility, and the need for the new economy, the need for the young people is to have a much more flexible system, which is more adapted to the way we're going to work tomorrow.
Yeah,
Danny
of
Lang,
course,
Danny Lang, do you take the point that the days when you enter a company at the age of 18 or 20 and leave it when you're 62 are over?
Completely,
Yes.
I take that completely into account. But the issue is that today we have lots of people who go through lots of periods of unemployment, precarious jobs, and these kind of things. And with the new system, when every time you pay, you get 10 euros, you will have 1 point. And I don't think that's fair, because if you are rich, if you are in the same place during your whole life, you will accumulate the same points as these people who have precarious. And how will you take that into account?
This is not true, sir. I'm sorry, this is not true.
Every time I say something,
you just
say
gave an
that.
example. Someone that is working part-time, for instance, okay? And part-time earning less than, let's say, 500 euro per month. And you have thousands and thousands of people who are part-time who are earning less than 500 euro per month. In the current system, they are not validating any trimester. Okay?
So,
Trimesters,
yes,
meaning
quarters.
They are not benefiting from the system because they are under a certain limit. Okay, you need more than 500 euros per month to count one trimester. Today they are counting 0 trimester. In the new system, they will earn points. They will win points in earning 500 euros.
Yeah,
as simple as
I'm
that.
I'm not saying it's
simple
that's
as
a bad
that.
thing, but you could change that under the current framework. You
There's
didn't
frame-
need. You didn't. The point at the end of the day, it will be the state who decides the value.
I want to come back.
no.
I want to come back to a point that Jacques-Marie Le Sillon made, which is an important one, which is the government putting the emphasis, and we heard the Prime Minister say this, on women.
Les femmes seront les grands.
Women will be the big winners of the universal system.
Aujourd'hui,
Today, women's pensions are nearly half that of men's. No one can accept this.
Qui peut l'accepter? Personne. Les femmes connaissent plus
Women
souvent
are
que les
more
hommes
likely to
les
take work
interventions
leave,
carrières,
notably to
notamment
raise children.
s'occuper de leurs enfants.
The universal system will allow us to
Le
fix
système
this.
universel
Firstly, women will receive 100% of their salary while on maternity leave. Secondly, women will be able to earn extra points for each child, beginning with their first child.
Dès le premier enfant.
100% of salary while they're on maternity leave. First of all, will private companies go along with that? How will it work?
I don't know. You have to ask Jacques, I guess.
No, as of today, you have the plan, the project plans that you will be contributing to the solidarity by contributing under 120,000 euros. Each and every French citizen will contribute by giving a certain amount percent under 120k euros. On top of that, I must say that this is a limit where you have less than 1% of the people who are earning more, right? For the remaining less than 1% people, these people will not benefit from any rights of points, but they will have to pay an additional sum for solidarity, okay? And this is exactly what was proposed by the famous Thomas Piketty, because this system is inspired by the book he has written a few years ago. So,
and now Piketty says everything he thinks about this system. You can see his interviews. He is as upset, even more upset than I am.
This is exactly what he has written in his book. Okay, so under 120k, you are contributing to the system, you are earning points, And if you are above this limit, which represents 10,000 euros per month, and believe me, 10,000 euros per month is quite an amount. Over this limit, you are just paying a contribution for the solidarity.
How much?
2.8. So what?
So what?
You are paying 2.8.
Given all the gifts you have,
it's not a gift.
You have given
it's
to
not
the
a gift.
people who are to the 1% in this country, you dare saying that this is an important contribution to solidarity? Honestly,
So they are contributing the same way as the others up to 120. First, and above this limit, they are paying. We are making, as you say, we are making the rich pay, right?
2%. I didn't say that.
2% without any rights, sir. And these people are paying the taxes. In France, 10%,
could you remind me how
10% of the
amount
people
of the
are representing 80% of the
that
tax
you made
income?
with all the previous policies, with the flat tax, with the removing the tax on the very rich people, 3.7 billion euros a year, and now you're coming.
Philip Gollop, I want to ask
No,
you.
it's nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense.
Come on.
We are asking the rich people to pay a contribution
Of 2%.
without any return. Is that something strange for you?
Of 2%.
Philip Gollop, let's talk about the optics of this, because we have a president, again, as we said at the outset, who ran bringing together reformers from the center-left and the center-right. How's Emmanuel Macron doing, and can he roll with the punches on this one?
Well, he's not doing terribly well right now. I mean, if you look at it from the standpoint of objective, political analysis, and his credibility and legitimacy were seriously tested with the Gilets jaunes.
And then he rolled with the punches and did okay in the European election.
Yes, he did. He did okay. I mean, he has a pretty solid base, which is about 30% of the electorate, that votes. But that's 30% of the electorate. It doesn't go much beyond that. his great advantage is that the political forces facing him, there are no significant political forces facing him aside the far right. So he has a significant political advantage because there's been installed a kind of permanent duel between the far right in France and himself, and that he's assuming, I suppose, and the people in La République En Marche are assuming, I suppose, that during the next presidential election, there's his own election, Macron's election, will become almost inevitable because the candidate facing him will be Marine Le Pen. So there's this curious, and I think actually probably quite problematic political situation where you have this dualism in French politics right now, where the other political forces are not sufficiently present
And have they suddenly
don't
been,
have enough voice.
Have they suddenly been so? Because we saw the Yellow Vest movement dominate the headlines for nearly a year.
Yeah.
And since last Thursday, it's been the return of the trade union.
Yeah, but trade unions. See what you have here. I think is that the political parties, the political parties of the left, are split. They're disunited. They have some ideas, but there's no coherent political agenda on the left. I'm talking about both the social democratic
But
left.
so
The result of that is that what you're seeing is or in the traditional right actually, which Macron has siphoned off. He's siphoned off a significant part of the right. So what you have here is the unions taking the civil society, actually, taking the space that the political parties, the other political parties used to have.
Jacques-Marie Le Sien, let me ask you, is it a question of take it or leave it from what was announced this Wednesday? Or just like the unions did an opening gambit with the strike that started last Thursday, is this all open for compromise and we're just sit down at the bargaining table?
First of all, we had negotiation and discussions with the unions. The vast majority of the unions are in favor of this move to the new system. Okay, but you have at least two unions, CGT and FO, who are totally against because they are defending the.
You heard the CFDT leader there saying that a red line had been crossed, and without him, there can't be.
UNSA also.
We'll see, but UNSA, CFTC, CGC, CFDT are in favor of the new system. The challenge for the president or for the prime minister is now to validate and make it vote by the assembly. It's for February, okay? And we moved the limit because you will enter in the system only if you are born after 75, okay? Which gives you quite a certain visibility. The people will be impacted only in 2037 or 8. So you have plenty of time to do a lot of things. The challenge is, when I was in some debates on French TV, I had a communist, socialist, left, Front National. They haven't read the report. They haven't read the report. I was the only one of the panel having read the report. And when we, just before the debate, you mentioned that the Prime Minister did not announce that the value of the point will be evolving according to the salaries.
To wages. No,
to wages.
He said to inflation.
No, to wages. May I read it?
To wages instead of inflation.
May I read it?
Right now it's indexed to inflation. He said,
May I quote the Prime Minister?
We know that point.
Okay, he said exactly the contrary of what you are saying.
From when on?
The law will make it happen that the points will evaluate not according to the prices, but on the wages, which in France is always better than inflation. This is exactly what was already written in the report
I know that
nobody has read, and this is what the Prime Minister has announced.
And that's why I'm upset, by the way.
Do you agree? Do you agree? The Prime Minister has announced it. Do you agree? It has announced.
If I may just say something which is complementary from a political point of view. We used to have a right-wing, a moderate right-wing and moderate left-wing, in which the elites were completely convinced by the neoliberal system, but the electoral basis was opposed to it. Now, Macron was able to put together the elites of this party, the richest 20% of the country, and they support him, which called the Bloc bourgeois in the terms of Amable and Palombarini, and the people at the basis. And you have lots of right-wing people in the streets, in the demonstration. Now, also, you Come on, were you in the demonstration?
No,
I was in
you
there.
say Macron has gathered the 20% rich.
Macron
which
has
is fantasy,
gathered.
which is fantasy. I can find
Look at
thousands,
the map.
I
Look
can
at the
find
map and
millions
look
of-
at the sociology of people who have voted for him. The very rich people, the people belonging to the bloc bourgeois, that corresponded to the elites of the Socialist Party and the right-wing party.
I mean, there are sociological distinctions.
That is why
false.
you don't have any,
not true.
opposition as we used to have, because the basis, the social basis of the right wing and the left wing, these people were not in favor of
And we're seeing the same thing with
as opposed to the elite.
We're seeing the same thing in the UK. The old left versus right divide has changed considerably. François Xavier Oliveau, for people watching our show, the question is, France's social welfare system, is it in danger? Is the model about to be shaken to its core?
It always has been very strong in France. I would say it would be much stronger with reforms, including capitalization and pension funds for me, because the 14% would be better employed by being used in financial markets and get the benefits from historically over a long period increasing financial markets.
I mean the financial markets. The historic
That's my point.
The recent historic.
disagree.
The recent.
In New Zealand, you have better pensions for a lower input from workers.
Yeah, but I mean the recent historic experience of financial markets has not been good. Huh?
I mean, you cannot say,
disagree.
please.
We all disagree.
Well, one at a time.
Fair enough.
François Xavier Oliveau.
Thank you very much. You cannot say that financial markets are making tons of money and people are getting rich, and not saying that if people on the street would benefit from it, it wouldn't be helpful for them. But anyway, so you cannot say that. I mean, you cannot say the rich are getting all the benefits from financial markets, and then when I say, well, everybody should profit from financial markets, you say, oh no, it doesn't work. That's completely insane.
Good point.
Well,
So anyway,
it's actually not insane.
Philip, please let me make it through.
Good point.
Is the social system in danger? I say no. I mean, we still have 56% of redistribution in France. France is a very redistributive country, and there's a huge.
But inequality is growing.
Second most or something. Inequality is growing, but inequality is pretty low compared to a number of countries. And I would say that there are some schemes which would be certainly extremely beneficial, and I've been writing recently on monetary policy and the way that monetary policy should be sent towards direct distribution to people. So that's another story, but that could certainly help a lot the redistribution and financial stability of the markets. No, I don't think. I think the whole economy is producing enough wealth for everyone. There are also some debates about who should benefit from it and how it redistributed. Honestly, the French system is one of the most redistributive in the world by all means.
All right, one final question, Philip Gala, because in the 2020 U.S. election, when they're finished talking about impeachment, will this be the big issue? Inequality?
Yeah, inequality is the big issue, and if you look at the money, is one of the big issues. It's a primary issue for the base of the Democratic Party. In any case, if you look at the success currently of both the Warren candidacy and Bernie Sanders' candidacy, the youth that are behind those two candidacies, which came out of the Occupy movement of the 1990s over the question of inequality, I think the issues of a fairer, in the U.S., and then pretty much everywhere else, in Chile today, for instance, a fairer distribution of the material and symbolic goods in society is a core issue for all of our societies.
And one we'll continue to discuss here in the France 24 debate. I want to thank Philip Golub. I want to thank Danny Long. I want to thank as well Jacques-Marie Lossian and François Xavier Oliveau. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.